Good morning, Year 8. Mr. Byrne here, and I'm going to be taking you through your next World War II lesson. What I'd like you to do to get started, please, is the Do Now task. How did World War II impact the people of Britain? That should have gave you enough time then. A few ideas you could have wrote down. You could have wrote down enlistment, so all those people that enlisted and signed up to go and fight during World War II. You could have thought about the evacuation of Dunkirk and the soldiers and the evacuation back to Britain. You could have talked about evacuation within Britain, moving children from the towns and cities to the countryside, or even something like what you did with Mr. Bentley last lesson, the Battle of Britain and the impact of Winston Churchill. But today, what we're going to move on to do, we're going to look at how did rationing affect the people of Britain. So can you write that title in for me, please? Right then, what we're going to have a look at today is why did Britain have to ration? And rationing just means limit the amount of something. So during World War II, all sorts of essential and non-essential foods were rationed, as well as clothing, furniture, and petrol. So lots of items are being limited. Before the war, Britain imported 55 million tons of food. After the war, this figure had dropped to 12 million. So that's a massive drop in the amount of food that is being brought into Britain. So there's a lot less for everyone to have. To make the British weak, the Germans tried to cut off supplies of food and other goods. Marines would target and attack many of the ships that brought the food to Britain. So German strategy was to cut off the supply routes of food to Britain. But why did we have to ration? Well, the main thing is the Nazis' aim was to starve out the British people. Hitler believed this was the best way to knock Britain out of the war, by making the people so desperate they would be forced to surrender. And Hitler thought starving them out would make the country weak and force us into surrender. So this wouldn't be a choice, this would be a forced surrender. So after 1940, in Britain, we had to stick to a strict regime of rationing all across the nation. What I'd like to have a go at now then, your teacher should have attached a worksheet. And I want you to have a look at these items here on your worksheet. And I want you to guess how much did you get per week during rationing of World War II of these items. If you complete that, there's a few questions underneath for you top historians to think about how you would feel about living through rationing. What I'd like to do now then, that should give you enough time. I'd like to either get a different coloured pen or change the colour of your font on your computer and mark. Let's have a look how well you did then. So, milk, you would be given 3 pints of milk per week. So all of these are going to be a weekly amount, so over 7 days. Meat, you would be given 450 grams. Eggs, 1. Cheese, 90 grams. Bacon, 4 rashers, so 4 pieces. Tea, 15 tea bags. Sugar, 230 grams. Margarine, so like butter, 230 grams. And 100 grams of sweets. And what you need to know is children who were of school age also received fruit, full meat allocation, and 3 eggs a week, the equivalent of half a pint of milk per day. This is to aid their development. They are going to be the future generations that will do the future working, the future fighting, and will build the nation in the future. So obviously the government understood that we had to keep the children healthy and strong. So when we look at this task then that was underneath the questions, I'm assuming a lot of you would have felt hungry. You would have felt the impact on your body. However, I'd like to think about, apart from hunger, how do you think people felt during rationing? And I'm gonna write down a few things that might help you when answering this. What might it have been like to live through rationing? So imagine your day-to-day amount of food consumption was brought down. Would that make you angry? Would that make you mad? Would that make you more tolerant of others? And I want you to think, what's the morale going to do? So, what is the British view of the war going to be? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? Is this going to unite us or is this going to tear us apart? And I'd also do like to think, were people sold on rationing straight away? So, do you think we instantly got behind this new scheme or do you think it took us time to develop the right systems? So, pause the video and answer those questions, please. Okay then. So we know that rationing is not going to be an instant success. It's not going to be something that people straight away think is amazing. So what you have to do, you have to use propaganda. So you have to use messages to the people to try and get them to believe in it. And what they would do is they would try and sell it. So they would use things like posters. So rationing means a fair share for us all. And they're using specific words like a fair share to try and get us to live together. This is from a Ministry of Food advertisement in 1940. And again, it's using words like you'll not grumble when you've read these lines by sweeping for minds. What it's doing is pushing on your emotions of patriotism in understanding that we have to beat the opponents rather than worry about vast amount of food consumption. And by 1939, Britain only grew enough food to feed 1 in 3 people. So rationing became a nationwide necessity. We can't import loads of food, we can't grow loads of food, so what we need to do is ration the food we have. So cleverly produced propaganda encouraged the British people to ration, grow their own food, and make their own contribution to the war effort. And we had simple policies introduced to try and get the people on board, such as the Dig for Victory campaign. This campaign was introduced by the government in October 1939, very soon after the start of the war. And the people of Britain were urged to use their gardens and every spare piece of land, such as parks, golf clubs, tennis courts, to grow vegetables. Even the moat at the Tower of London was used to grow potatoes and green vegetables. So I'd like to have a go at this question now then. Why do you think it was so important to the British government that everyone was encouraged to ration? Okay then. I'm hoping most of you thought the idea is so we don't run out of food. We need to supply the people at home enough food to survive, but we also need to produce enough food to ship out to the troops who are fighting all across the globe. So your task then, your teacher should have gave you a sheet underneath your rationing sheet, and it should have 5 examples of different propaganda posters used during World War II. And what I'd like you to do is remind me what propaganda means. If you can't remember, look back in the video because I've described that. And then I'd like you to look at the posters and try and figure out what is the message of each poster. So, for example, this poster here, Dig for Victory, that is encouraging people to grow their own food because then you don't have to ration because then we can grow extra food to supply the nation. And then I'd like you to sum up what the poster is trying to say in 5 words. And I'd look at all of the posters to try and get inspiration for each one. And finally, who is the poster trying to appeal to? Why? And what is the significance? So I'd like you to fill those boxes in on your worksheet. So pause the video here and complete that task, please. Okay, so you should have completed that task and narrowed down the information. So what we're going to have a look at now, we are going to get you to be creative. You have seen what the government created in terms of propaganda to get the people on board with rationing. So what I would like you to do is to design your own rationing campaign poster, which would be suitable for display in Britain during World War II. In your poster, you must use 3 out of the 6 words you circled as part of your posters that you looked at previously in the previous task. And I want you to include a large and clear image that backs up the message of your poster. And in your poster, you've got to use persuasive language and personal addresses. So that is persuading them and being very personalized in making them follow the idea of rationing. And in the poster, you could also add things such as recipes, amounts of foods, or what could you do with the foods. Okay, so what I've also done, you can pause on this and use this information to do your task. Or I've put some pictures here of different propaganda campaigns that we use to give you some inspiration for your tasks. So pause here and have a go at doing your creative task. And you can use this slide or this slide, whichever you'd prefer to on the video. Okay then, once you've done that, send both your propaganda poster and your PDF sheet that you've completed to your history teacher, either myself, Mr. Solway, or Mr. Bentley. The final thing we're going to look at today then is, on a scale of 1 to 10, what extent would rationing affect the lives of British people? So 1 is not at all, 10, it's going to affect them massively. And I'd like you to circle why you picked that number. And then what I'd like you to do, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think rationing was for the British government during World War II? So again, 1 is not important, 10 is really, really important. And when you're doing that question, think about fighting across the globe, so fighting against Japan, fighting against Germany, but also the home front. You've got to create bullets, you've got to create weapons. You've then got to think about storing everybody's food. So how important would it have been to the government? And once you've completed that, save all of your work and send it to your history teacher. And that is today's lesson on rationing complete. Stay safe, everybody.